Yo, what's going on guys, Arekkz here, welcome back to another Division video, and in today's video I want to speak to you guys in slightly more detail about update 1.8. If you guys haven't seen yesterday's video, then the Division game dropped a brand new teaser for update 1.8 called Resistance, and of course in that it spoke about the fact there is going to be a new expansion to the map, a new PvP mode, PvE mode, and of course some other stuff on top as well. Yesterday I gave you a quick summary of the information we currently had. However, they did then say that today they were going to follow up with a State of the Game stream with some gameplay, some more details, and just in general give us a better insight into the update itself. So in this video, we're going to break down the stream, speak about all the most important stuff that they discussed. Of course, do bear in mind this is not going to be everything. They are, as they often have done in the past, going to be revealing things over the next few weeks. So today the focus was on the new map area and a few extra things like that. But of course, following up from that, they'll then speak about things like the new rogue system, gear changes, weapon balances, all that kind of stuff. So for the time being, if you missed the stream, then here is everything you need to know. If you do enjoy this video, then a like would be super appreciated. Any questions, drop them down below. But to get started, as a very quick top-level summary, in case you guys missed anything yesterday, then 1.8, from the information we have currently, is going to include a new map expansion in the PvE, the light zone, so to speak, effectively outside the dark zone. So it is a PvE zone. It is on the west side of the map. It's called West Side Pier, and it consists of 2 zones. There will be a new PvE mode called Resistance, which is effectively Division's Horde mode. There will be a new PvP mode called Skirmish, which is 4v4, no AI. There'll be a new social space called Hudson Camp, as well as new exotic weapons, changes to the rogue mechanic, ways to optimize your gear, and some extra stuff on top. So, diving a little bit deeper, Resistance, first up, they didn't show this today, but they did, of course, give us a little bit more detail on the mode itself. It is, as mentioned, the Division's quote-unquote Horde mode, so it is waves of enemies. You will load into the activity, you will fight waves of enemies, and of course it will get progressively more challenging. It is an activity that can be done solo, so if you are a solo player, you will not have to go into this with a group. You can do it solo, you can do it with a group. It is designed to be a slightly more casual activity, at least at the low end, so if you want something to jump into, earn some gear, pass some time, this is going to be an activity for you. However, conversely, at the topper end, it is still going to provide a much greater challenge. So for those of you guys that do actually want some, slightly more challenging endgame content, then it should also deliver that for you too. It is, of course, an activity that is designed to be something you can keep coming back to, given the kind of wave nature of it. You jump in, you do your waves, you complete it, or you die, and you just jump in and do the same thing over and over again. And of course, completing that will reward you with loot. On the flip side, for the PvP players out there, then you have Skirmish, which is your 4v4 team-based PvP mode. There is no AI, there are no objectives other than to kill the opposing team and get the most kills. So polar opposite to, say, Last Stand, which has both AI and objectives in, this is literally just good old-fashioned team deathmatch, essentially 4v4, shoot players in much more condensed, custom-built maps. They'll be much smaller, they'll be more focused, there'll be less running around, more fighting. The emphasis here is on quicker games, stronger focus on the combat. So essentially, what the PvP players have been asking for quite some time now, they are finally going to get. So PvE players and PvP players, you're both going to get something out of this. Now, speaking about the actual new area itself, the new area in the map, as mentioned, it is the West Side Pier, split into 2 separate zones. It is a new place to explore, and it's going to play very differently to the rest of the open world. It has a new spawn system, so you will always have a different experience, paired with the fact that, of course, the factions are now working together, so you're going to get some rather interesting combinations and some synergies, the way that, say, like, LMB might work with cleaners. Imagine, like, an LMB putting down, like, a healing station with cleaners, and you got some of the big shield guys. It's going to present some pretty interesting challenges. But, of course, on top of that, thanks to the new kind of dynamic spawning AI system, it also means that every time you enter this area, it will play out slightly differently. So as opposed to kind of knowing the default spawns for enemies, knowing that, say, the south of the kind of pier, you typically have a group of LMB that roam around. Instead, every time you go in, the spawns will be randomized, so you're not necessarily always going to get that same encounter, the same engagement all the time. On top of that, the map itself, most of it is open for you to explore, as you normally would do. However, there are a couple of areas within this zone that are designated for the new activities. One example of that being the Intrepid aircraft carrier, the big ship that you see by the pier. That is not somewhere you will just walk into during general open world exploration. That is something that you will work your way into during the Resistance game mode. But as mentioned, that is one of those kind of zones that you won't just be able to randomly walk into. I'm sure someone will find a way to glitch into it, but the point is most of the area, most of the map is something you can kind of just openly explore, but if there are a couple of sections that you can't just actively walk into, that's because they're tied to one of those two activities. There'll be areas with custom built maps for PvP, and there'll of course be areas for the PvE stuff. There is also field proficiency tied to this new zone as well, so while you're there killing NPCs, completing activities, you can also earn caches in the process. Now within this zone, there is also the new social space called Camp Clinton. This is, they kind of described it as a quote-unquote terminal light. Essentially, it will have all the kind of stuff that you would typically expect from a social space, from a terminal. So vendors, recalibration stations, stash, crafting, etc. Plus, there'll be new ways to track your weekly assignments and a few other things like that on top. Now, when you're actually in the zone itself, there are these new things called alerts. These are activities that are delivered to you by Shade. They will then drive you around the map. So they're these little kind of yellow icons you see on the map. They're currently running towards one in the actual gameplay, but essentially they're a mixture of quick and sort of slightly longer length activities. Some of them can be done pretty swiftly, some of them do go a little bit more in depth, some of them are slightly more evolved, but either way, they will spawn around the map, again, in different locations, not necessarily always in fixed locations. The idea is that after a predetermined time, there will be new alerts that basically just pop up on your map, and they constantly drive you around the map in these little loops that you can just basically jump back into and just sort of, you know, enjoy your time playing through casually without having to effectively go looking for these things too much. And again, that also factors in with the new dynamic AI spawning system. It also means that these alerts won't always play out the same way. So if you go in one time and find there's an alert in the southwest of the map, you might go there and engage with, say, LMB and cleaners, then you kind of work your way north and come back south, and the next time you do it, you might be fighting like Rikers and Rioters. So again, alerts themselves will be in different locations, as will the NPCs, so hopefully when you are kind of repeatedly visiting this zone, you won't necessarily always have the same experience. I imagine there will of course eventually come times where you do start seeing the same kind of encounters, because I mean there's going to be a finite number of times you can really mix things up. But either way, knowing that you can basically just sort of like sit and wander around this zone, constantly doing things in slightly different ways, should make for some slightly more varied gameplay. Additionally, something else worth calling out is that completing these alerts will of course give you loot, a few other things like that, but on top of that you will also get Division Tech. Now Division Tech is let's be honest, a long forgotten resource. It's something that used to be very, very important in the Division and gradually start to get phased out. Of course, at the time, people weren't a huge fan of it because some people weren't typically massive fans of the Dark Zone, and that is predominantly where you would get D-Tech from. Well, in this new zone, in the West Side Pier, you can get Division Tech outside of the Dark Zone. So initially, for PvE players, this is not going to mean you suddenly have to trek back into the Dark Zone. If you don't want to be there, you can farm your materials outside. But more importantly, this material, D-Tech, is now going to tie into the new gear optimization system. Now, they haven't gone into detail about this system, they haven't explained what you can do with it, but the Ubisoft blog post essentially describes it as a means to kind of customize or re-customize some of your favorite pieces of gear. So it might well be like a kind of higher degree of recalibration. Honestly, I don't really know at this stage. It could be one of those things where like once you've kind of done what you want to do through recalibration, maybe it opens up like an extra tier, maybe it allows you to recalibrate like a third option. I don't really know at this stage. Point is, it's linked to that. So when they do eventually shed the light on the optimization system, know that D-Tech is going to become a very important resource. So with that in mind, if you guys want anything to do now between 1.7 and 1.8, then farming D-Tech isn't going to be a bad thing to do. I mean, it's always going to be useful to have, so if you're not already sitting on an untold amount of it since you haven't been using it, then it might be worth stockpiling some of that. On top of that, there will also be some new narrative hooks. Now, don't necessarily take this to mean a story mission. In fact, by the kind of descriptions, I don't think we're getting any new story missions. I could be wrong, maybe they haven't revealed it yet, but from what they are describing, it seems like a lot of the narrative stuff is going to be delivered through audio logs, but there will be new audio logs throughout this new zone, which means if you're kind of exploring around, you actually go looking for stuff, then you can actively find new parts of the story. You can actually start to discover new stuff. So for those of you guys that are actually keen to sort of find out how the story's developed beyond that point, find out why the factions are teaming up and whatnot, then you can of course do that if you go exploring. And then finally, the last thing they rounded out the stream with was new exotic weapons. They didn't tell us what they are or anything like that, but they did say, as a kind of final rounding out note, that there will be some new exotic weapons. So hopefully, over the course of the next few weeks, when they start doing more streams showing us additional gameplay, we might get some insight into that. But for the time being, that is pretty much it. That is, based on today's stream, a summary of some of the stuff we can expect in 1.8. They did say they have a lot more to talk about, so this is not the only stuff. And of course, we do still have yet to see skirmish and resistance game modes in depth, so that is also something we will be seeing over the coming weeks. But for the time being, it is pretty exciting. It's definitely some substantial new content. It is all free, so if you guys already have the game, then it's definitely going to be worth jumping back in to test it all out. It is worth noting that right now, there is of course no release date for this just yet. They are still, working on it and kind of like just showing it to us in stages, so there will of course also be a PTS before the actual update comes out. So as and when dates are revealed for either the release or the PTS, I will keep you guys up to date. Now, just before I round up the video, a couple more passing notes. This weekend, for those of you guys that are playing right now, there is going to be a special event, extra drops from named enemies. So if you want to take advantage of that, that is running this weekend. On top of that, one change they are making in 1.7, the masks are being removed from leaderboards. They are instead going to be added to playlist commendations. So for those of you guys that want to get them and didn't necessarily have the time to get involved in the global events, like me for example, I didn't really have the time to sink too much time into the global events to get the masks, then they are actually tied to commendations now. So they did say that some of those are going to be pretty challenging, but there will be better ways for you to get the masks than having to grind those global events. So that's coming, and also there are various bug fixes they're working on, things like the RPM glitch and all that, so that is all being addressed. That's stuff they spoke about at the very beginning of the stream, so just wanted to kind of like throw that in at the end in case you guys missed it. But anyway, that's it from me. That's what you guys need to know. Gameplay in the background was of course all from the new build. Hasn't been fully optimized yet. There is of course still test stuff they're doing, so if you see any frame drops, that's just because it's a development build. Anyway, thanks for watching, take it easy, catch you next time, peace out.